The Allen Line Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
A new law in Colorado is going to change the state's chain laws, look at adding chain-up areas, examine parking options in some high-impact locations, set up some left-lane restrictions, and more. I'll go over what's happening and why it's important with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association. Also, I'll discuss a lawsuit over a truck ban in the commercial areas of Vail, Colorado, and its implications nationally with Fulton and OOIDA State Affairs expert Doug Morris. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. New details tonight about FMCSA's plans to get feedback on its safety fitness determination process. The agency recently announcing 3 separate listening sessions dedicated to the issue. We already knew about the in-person event on June 29th at the Texas Trucking Show in Houston. Now we know when the 2 virtual listening sessions will be held. The first comes on June 25th, a few days before the in-person event. The third on July 31st. FMCSA will be looking for input at all 3 as the agency considers a new way of determining when a motor carrier is not fit to operate commercial motor vehicles. For more information on the listening sessions, including how to participate, we've got a link at landlinenow.com. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration posting 2 separate exemption requests this week, giving the public 30 days to comment on each. The first request stems from Oregon, where the state DOT is asking for a limited exemption from commercial driver's license rules concerning acceptable proof of citizenship. The application was made on behalf of citizens of the freely associated states who now live in Oregon and want to obtain a CDL. For reference, the freely associated states are the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and the Republic of Palau. And while citizens are already allowed to enter the United States as non-immigrants and can work in the U.S. without a visa, the current setup keeps them from obtaining standard commercial learner's permits and CDLs. If the exemption is granted, that would change in Oregon. Meanwhile, the other exemption request comes from 3 North LLC. The company is seeking a 5-year exemption for 3 of its CDL holders who are under the age of 21. As a regulation state now, CDL holders under the age of 21 are limited to intrastate operations in the driver's home state. If granted, 3 North, which transports concrete for wind turbine foundations, says the 3 people under the exemption would drive for less than 20 miles a day in another state, but only after they have been driven there by CDL holders over the age of 21. Volvo Trucks North America and Mack Trucks are recalling hundreds of new trucks after discovering an issue with a steering system. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Mack is recalling close to 800 Anthem, Granite, and Terra Pro trucks model year 2025. Volvo Trucks is also recalling nearly 500 VHD, VN, and VNR electric trucks model year 2025 as well. In trucks affected by the recall, the drag link may contain an improperly heat-treated ball stud that can fail, resulting in a sudden loss of steering control. There is no warning that may indicate ball stud failure. Mack and Volvo are also urging owners in affected trucks not to drive the vehicles until dealers can inspect and fix the issue free of charge. Notification letters will be sent out in August. Meanwhile, Volvo is also dealing with another recall. This one has to do with a separate steering issue. More than 400 model year 2025 VHD and VN trucks are affected. A steering gear may have an improperly seated plug in the valve housing, which can result in a sudden loss of steering control. For questions about any of these recalls, contact customer service or your dealer. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance has released the results of its unannounced Brake Safety Blitz, dubbed Brake Safety Day. Throughout Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., inspectors carried out just under 5,000 routine inspections with a focus on brake systems and components. More than 88% of the vehicles inspected came back clean. Just over 11% were hit with out-of-service violations. Defective brakes made up the biggest number. CVSA holds 2 annual brake safety campaigns. Brake Safety Day is a surprise. Brake Safety Week is not. The next one is scheduled for 7 days starting August 25th across North America. Federal prosecutors in Illinois say they've nabbed a cargo thief who posed as a broker to steal $9.5 million worth of goods. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois says the man, Ivaris Zigmantis, used various aliases to falsely pose as a representative of real and fictitious carriers and brokers involved in transporting shipments across state lines. After getting shipments routed to him, the indictment says Zigmantis and others diverted them and stole the goods. As part of the fraud scheme, prosecutors claim Zigmantis used aliases to open bank accounts and mailboxes and created email addresses and websites in the names of fake individuals and entities. Keith Lewis, Vice President of Operations for CargoNet, says this type of crime has become more and more common in recent years.
So the increase in traditional theft up about 60%, and then fraud is taken off, and we've seen increases in some quarters upwards of 700%. On fraud, where they're using some type of deceptive act, and there's a lot of different silos on that, and they sometimes join together to steal freight. And what we're seeing more now is even on traditional cargo theft and pilferages, and especially in the fraud theft area, more targeted commodities.
The suspect in this case is charged with 6 counts of wire fraud, 5 counts of bank fraud, and 2 counts of theft of interstate shipments. We have new details to a story we reported on nearly a year and a half ago. An Ohio trucking company has agreed to pay one of its former truck drivers $65,000 after reaching a settlement with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Early last year, we told you about the lawsuit filed in federal court on behalf of Charles Lynch III, who belongs to the Torah-observant Christianity religion. When Lynch told his company managers at Wheeler Trucking that he couldn't work Saturdays because his faith requires him to be off for the Sabbath, the lawsuit claims management responded with an expletive and fired him. Lynch also claims he was harassed for more than 4 years while working for Wheeler, harassment that included racial slurs. The EEOC says the $65,000 settlement was reached last week. Wheeler also agreed to 18 months of court-monitored oversight. Officials north of the border are on strike watch. The Public Service Alliance of Canada, the union representing border agents, issued a statement on Friday stating that negotiations with the Canada Border Services Agency would continue until Wednesday. Some 9,000 people were prepared to begin a strike on Friday, but that's on hold for now. No matter what happens, the Canada Border Services Agency says the border will remain open. That's because 90% of frontline border services officers are essential workers, which means they would continue working through a strike. But picketing and other disruptions could lead to delays in border wait times. That is, again, if a strike occurs. We'll keep you updated if and when that happens. The Departments of Transportation in Oklahoma and Arkansas have big plans for US 412 between I-35 and I-49. The two are working on upgrades in hopes of converting the roadway into an interstate. They're also planning a study on what it would take to get that designation. A stretch of highway that connects Wyoming and Idaho has been shut down after what authorities are calling a catastrophic landslide damaged it. This happened Saturday along the Teton Pass, just days after a crack and drop in the road appeared. Nobody was hurt in the collapse, but the connection between Victor, Idaho and Jackson, Wyoming is closed indefinitely. The alternate route puts drivers more than 60 miles out of the way. Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon signed an emergency declaration over the weekend, seeking help from the Federal Highway Administration for repair work. And finally, only in Louisiana, or maybe Florida too, but this one happened at a Loves in DeSoto Parish, Louisiana last week. A sheriff's deputy was called out to handle a small alligator that was seen hanging out behind the truck stop. In a social media post, the sheriff's office wrote that with all the flooding water and storms, even the gators are throwing in the towel and heading into town for a bite. Nobody was hurt and the gator was safely rehomed. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, I'll discuss a new law in Colorado that covers chain laws, parking, and more with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association, and we'll hear about a small town's commercial truck ban and its wider implications. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Every year, 28 million people are trafficked globally. The Your Roads, Their Freedom campaign seeks to raise awareness in the transport industry. Truck and bus drivers, be vigilant on the roads. If you see something suspicious, text 233-733 or be free.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. Things for truckers are about to change in the state of Colorado. A bill titled SB 100 is now law, and it covers a host of trucking issues in the state. Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association was in touch with state officials throughout the bill's journey in the State House, and I spoke with him recently about the various issues involved in the bill, starting with some changes to the state's chain laws. Let's start out with this bill, SB 100 in Colorado. I guess now a law. I guess the governor did sign that. And I wanted to talk about some of the changes that were made to the bill and the trucking issues that were involved. And the first thing are some issues involving chain laws. And I'm kind of curious, how would this actually change the rules that truckers have to follow in Colorado regarding chains?
You know, the real change on this is like right now, we have a must-carry provision, okay, much like some other states have, where you must be carrying chains from October 1 through May 1, okay? And that's because, you know, we have storms that come up pretty quickly on this, and we want truck drivers to be prepared, actually, and have their chains. And what they did was they sought to do was expand, actually, the areas in terms of the corridors within the state where it would be required to must carry. Now, right now, it was only I-70 from Golden to what was considered Dotsero, which is just kind of west of Vail on I-70, and this got expanded it to the state line with Utah, but also added some other passes where we end up having, frequently they have to deploy the chain line. They want to have drivers be prepared.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, one of the areas of particular concern regarding this was Interstate 70 through Glenwood Canyon. What is the situation there that spurred the legislature to pay particular attention to that?
Well, I would say this. You know, what we have is Glenwood Canyon is, a very key corridor, part of I-70. And when, we had several accidents there relating to trucks traveling too fast in there, crashing, or other problems like this. And it involved actually the closure in terms of the canyon. Now, the reason that this is so sensitive is the alternate route for Glenwood Canyon is a 4.5 to 5 hour detour. And so it is extremely, important. It's I'd say a key, segment that, we could have an incident on other parts of I-70, and we have maybe a shorter detour around it. But, right there, it is a very serious problem. So, we had actually supported the doubling of the fines for actually speeding through there in a commercial vehicle, just to kind of send the right message. It's only the financial side. It doesn't have anything to do relating to points or anything like that.
Now, as I understand it, another part of this is the bill would call for a couple of studies involving related issues here, and one of them regards chain-up areas. Do we know exactly what this study is going to look at? We do. We press to have two things done. One is additional chain up and chain down locations, as well as actually additional truck parking, looking at truck parking locations. And in our ends, I would just say
we believe that, and we've had this conversation, that we need to provide, actually. I mean, the state can pass laws and regulations, and we want to comply with them. But it's the state's responsibility to provide the environment and the conditions and safe conditions for truck drivers to be able to comply with that. And frankly, we feel there are not enough chain-up spaces out there, and putting drivers at risk, actually, to chain up. I mean, it isn't fair. And so we said, look, this is something where I think there's a lot of problems on this. I will say that one of the things that's happened is part of the problems and a lot of the concern for this year came out of the thing of the prior year. The prior year, I think we had I-80 closed more times than it had been in like 20 years. And so we had a lot of drivers drop down from I-80 to I-70. They weren't familiar as much with the corridor. And during the winter, there was a number of problems relating to failing to chain up, probably driving beyond conditions, and it created a number of issues there.
Okay. Something else in this bill that caught my attention, and this seems kind of odd to me. The bill text speaks about the possibility of adding technology to chain up and chain down locations to improve safety. And it seems to me that chaining up is a mainly physical process that just involves the trucker doing something by hand. What sort of technology are they talking about here, and how could it improve safety for the truckers in those chain up and chain down locations?
And that's a good question. I will say what we have encouraged and I think they're looking at is, one is what we will have, and essentially multiple chain spaces, in this, and it'll be along the side, the road. We want a separation from the road. We seek lighting and other items on there to make it safer for the drivers. But what tends to happen is, what we're looking at is you may have like 10 spaces, and they're more so in a row mark. And what happens is, the driver goes into, one of the truck drivers goes into the first or the two spaces, earliest spaces out there. And then the impression is the chain-up area is full. So then people start lining up along, actually, and into the onto the highway or on the shoulder on this end of it. So part of this is to alert them that, look, there are spaces further along, that those spaces are open, encouraging them to move to those locations, and also making them aware that, there are this many spaces before we have this queuing up of traffic, which happens today.
Okay. So this sounds like a system very similar to those parking technology systems that say X number of spaces in 10 miles.
Yeah, this is very similar in that, and but important. Like I said, one of the things that we're seeing is, and there's this frustration. Somebody's saying, why are they chaining up on the side of the road? We've got 5 or 6 spaces, and then, and what happens is the very first truck that stops and doesn't go in there because they believe it's filled ends up having this domino effect all the way down. So this is to try to kind of more utilize those spaces more effectively and make it safer altogether.
Okay. I want to switch to another part of this bill because, this thing covers a lot of territory.
Right.
Another provision, and I think you mentioned this earlier, it talks about a study on the impact of truck-related incidents on highways and the potential benefits of limited closures during snowstorms. And part of that involves studying the parking options that truckers have on I-70, as you mentioned earlier. And right. I'm wondering, is the lack of parking there causing some truckers that are traveling through the state to forge ahead when, if there were parking available, they would stop, or they should stop and they just keep going?
Mark, the answer is absolutely. And we made a point in that, and we said one of the big problems that we have in the I-70 corridor, and it has been there and for a number of years, is up in the high country, is the lack of truck parking. And we've ended up, in some cases, securing funding and other things to do this. The difficulty is, one, there are limited spaces that could be utilized up in that area. And frankly, there's some pushback from some of the communities on this about having, something like truck parking locations or anything like this. I mean, we know it's it's not a very low-cost thing to do up there, but it's essential. And so the other thing we've ended up saying is, look, we have looked at this, and so we do know that a lot of drivers do push on. And the fact is, hoping there will be parking somewhere along there. And frankly, there is none. Really, there's very few spaces between there and Grand Junction. And so one of the things we're seeking is to substantially increase, the truck parking in that corridor. And at the same time, we're looking at, on our end of it, is some items of where we look at as a chain assist program. And we're pushing to have funding set aside, much like they do in California, where you have something where drivers can end up pulling over and having assistance in terms of if they wish to have it chained up. Because, unfortunately, Mark, we have people who do have chains, but frankly have never chained up or haven't done it in a long time. And we want to end up making it as safe and convenient as possible. And so we see that as one. The other thing we would point out in regards to I-70, and we made a very clear point of this, is a major problem in terms of the safety issues on I-70 relating to, crashes and other things like this, ties back to the lack of adequate enforcement personnel in terms of the western part of the state there, the State Patrol. We have about less than half of the officers actually that are programmed for the State Patrol, for that west portion of I-70 and the northwest end of it, than what are, we have, about half as many officers there as needed. And the problem really comes down to the cost of living. The housing costs in places like Eagle and Summit County, where we have these resort areas, and that is so substantial that it's very difficult to keep State Patrol officers there. So what we have is, as soon as they can, they'll transfer out of there. So we have a very great lack of that. The other problem I think that we're seeing up there is, and the same thing's happening with CDOT and the maintenance personnel and some of that. So all these things contribute to some of the challenges and problems on I-70. And we said, look, to some extent, what we've been somewhat frustrated with is the impression has been, it's all about trucks. And we have done a great deal on our part in terms of efforts. We've worked with the state in terms of what we call the Mountain Rules Program, a great outreach program on that. We've worked with them on trying to kind of cut down on runaway trucks, and we've taken the lead on many of these ends of it. But at the same time, we have to actually have, we feel, the state step up in some ways on this end of it, in terms of truck parking, the chain-up locations, and also better traveler information in far out in advance of this, and also making sure one of these things that I think one of the things that we're continuing to see out there, and I will tell you I hear a lot about, is, we should have some sort of mountain driving certification. I don't think that's realistic, Mark, but it does point to the challenges of driving on a corridor like I-70.
I've been talking with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association about a new law in that state, previously Bill SB 100, and the various trucking issues it affects. We'll be back in a moment with more of that conversation. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine VibraTech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with VibraTech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truck Stop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Loadboard Pro. Attention professional drivers, do you owe money to the IRS? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. Call for help now, 855-976-4291. That's 855-976-4291.
Landline Now, welcome back. Before the break, I was talking with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association about a new law in that state, previously Bill SB 100, and the various trucking issues it affects. We now continue with the discussion of that bill, as well as some of the other current trucking matters in the state. There's one other thing in this bill that I did want to cover with you, Greg, as if it hadn't covered enough issues already. And that is some left lane restrictions. And I kind of want to start with what sort of left lane restrictions and where in the state would these apply? Well,
this is the left lane restrictions we're talking about are on I-70, and it's somewhat misleading, I would say. The vast majority of the left lane restrictions that are identified already exist. I mean, in a sense, they're in signage already. Having them actually placed into legislation, it didn't change things. It wasn't like we were going to be able to modify that. In many cases, what you have is those situations where you have steep inclines where the far left lane, is precluded from, commercial vehicles. But it's segments actually where we have in many cases some tight turns and things like this. It started out, to be honest with you, as from actually going to be a 160 miles sort of barring us from the left lane on this, and we said that's insane. Okay, it made no sense. The other thing I think we had to get across is the fact that how freight moves in Colorado. A great deal of freight in Colorado. Everything is kind of for distribution purposes comes out of almost the Denver metro area. So when we're looking at fuel, we're looking at grocery items and all this, and we're looking at communities in the West Slope. We're essentially serving them out of Denver. And so when you're looking at hours of service, it's one of those items to get that driver back within the same day. That's essential to drivers anymore. And so one of the things, as we indicated, is, if you bar us from that left lane and we're maybe stuck behind some, queue of long traffic slowly moving, when the truck's capable of moving faster, it makes no sense at all. So really, I would say, by and large, with the exception of, I think, two very small areas on that, those restrictions already existed today, Mark. And so I to be honest with you, it didn't change much. The one I would say that did and get added was on I-70 near Vail, which is Dow Junction. And I would say we agree with it. It's very tight turns, coming through there. And it's one of those things that I think even our safety folks said, it's in the best interest to actually have us, somewhat limited in that and be more so controlling our speed. And then the other thing was what we call Floyd Hill, which is, a climb coming out of Denver on this. And really what happens is we have 3 lanes and we'd like bars from the far left lane and this end of it, and it's only a few miles on that end of it. So it doesn't really change much. I would just tell you this, Mark. I mean, it's fine-wise, it's the same as what it was before. So, I think there was a lot of attention. It started out with a much longer segment on this, and then it came back to really what was virtually in place today.
Let's move on to another topic, and one that you brought up in an email that you sent earlier, and that is a lawsuit against the town of Vail, Colorado. And this is kind of an unusual situation. I'm wondering if you can start off by explaining what exactly it is that's happening in Vail.
Well, it's an interesting situation, I will tell you. What happened was several years ago, and frankly, this was during the COVID window, and I think to some extent, you have everyone focused on so many other things, and it began sort of what they had was a pilot program, and really what they were looking to do is effectively bar commercial vehicles from what they call Vail Village, which is where they have more so the older part of Vail. I mean, it's a good part of the overall town of Vail, and then there's also another part of it called Lion's Head, which is sort of another portion of the town actually. And what they did was they started out with this project, and the way it started out was like a voluntary effort, where what it was saying, okay, companies could end up, actually, they had loading docks. They built actually loading docks within the community and underground, like loading docks in areas. And what would happen is you could end up actually going to the loading dock, offsetting the load to actually a third party who they had selected to do this, who would deliver the product by these electric carts. And though they were charging in the range of like $3,000 for low volume end of it to $27,000 for folks on a higher volume basis. And so it was being subsidized. Now, what happened was when they ended up going to this point where it was no longer voluntary, it was effectively, they were sort of saying under their ordinance, they were either saying you were going to be barred from taking your motor vehicle into the area and making deliveries, and you either had the choice of using this third party that they had designated, or they said you can have the option of wheeling it in by hand cart or something from the Vail parking garage, which isn't all that close, and a couple of other locations, both of which made very little sense. I mean, really the process was to almost push you toward this third party. Now, that even was odd, and I think I sent you an article on this, Mark, and that they've selected this group that, really as a local set of folks who really had very little experience within transportation. And then they said they were going to do a request for proposal, and they never did that. Now, on our part, I would just say what we look at this as, the basis of our lawsuit, is we see this as a violation of what we call the F4A, which is kind of the interstate commerce end of it, where essentially they're seeking to restrict us access. They're trying to dictate our routes. They're essentially adding costs to our things like fees and that, which is barred actually under the federal law. And the only way you can actually do that under the law is if there is a safety issues on this, and that's been the basis. I mean, we've taken them to court. We've won an injunction for part of the ordinance because they had two parts of it. One was what they called the lower volume end of it, which was introduced earlier, and that's for a lot of folks not making high volume deliveries. And then they had the high volume one, which was for ones which is more like the FedEx and UPS. And so we have an injunction on that. We've filed suit to remove the rest of the, in terms of the ordinance. And, that's where it stands right now. We believe we've got a good case. Their case is based on safety and same concerns on that. And we would just tell you, Mark, we have not had a commercial vehicle accident within the town of Vail for 6 years, and that's as far back as we could go. And so it's hard to say that there's a safety issue. Not to mention the fact that even though we would conceivably, even if when we asked if we could run the same exact vehicles as possibly this third-party entity and not have to utilize them, we would be barred from doing that. So I think there's a lot of questionable things. I think there's a good investigative report on this end of it. Our concern is that this is an idea that I will just tell you, many communities in the country have flown out and are looking at that. We have one other community right now that's looking to implement it. We have several others that are it. So it's the court case is a very big one, and I will just tell you it's an important one on a national basis, and ATA and others are very interested as well.
Wow. It's a very unusual situation. You mentioned that you've had people from around the country coming and looking at this. Are you aware if any of them have actually copied kind of what Vail is doing?
Well, we have Breckenridge that is looking at trying to do something very similar. In fact, they had a RFP, request for proposal, and they awarded it to the same company. But literally, when we looked at it, there could have been only one company. But that would not stand up if our case goes through. We've heard of things like I think there's some sort of an item in New York where somebody's looking to copy it, and then we've had place like Aspen looking at it. I guess they've indicated Park City has flown out and was looking at it, even Salt Lake. So I think this is one of those items where it hits at the heart of actually what we do, the ability for us to compete. I mean, what they've done is effectively they created a monopoly in the area there, and that they are setting, dictating in terms of like when and routing and everything else like this. And I think we see this as an important, case for us. And even though Vail isn't a huge community, they are a kind of bellwether for a lot of ends of it, especially the resort end of it. And so hopefully we'll prevail. We said, look, we can work with the community and some of the things that they're looking at. I think really what it comes down to is they want to get rid of trucks altogether in the community of any kind, motor vehicles. In fact, after the third segment on this of the ordinance was to get rid of the waste trucks, which we think would be a real interesting experience there. So I don't know how they would do that, but that's one of the items we're looking at as well.
How do they think their garbage is going to go away?
I mean, we are wondering how that is too. And we have some of the waste companies, but they have been clear that that was their next kind of target on this. And so I think what's going to happen is, the challenge that's happened when we looked at this is I think, you realize right now is on our end of it, this isn't really so much even just barring, motor vehicles, but it's selectively barring them. And we have, one group that can't operate into the area. Then we also have some people who have, businesses who are in the core area of the village that have a loading dock, and they're able to operate. So it's not like a size and weight, regulation or anything like this. And, we've ended up, when they mentioned the safety issue, we said nobody's ever mentioned that to us.
That was Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association talking about a new law in that state that affects a number of trucking issues, as well as an anti-truck ordinance in the town of Vail. We'll be back after a short break with more of our conversation with Greg Fulton. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to Prepass.com.
Since you started, What you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. Before the break, I was talking with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association about an ordinance in the town of Vail that essentially bans trucks from some parts of the town's commercial districts. And we were discussing the safety aspect of why the city chose to pursue that ordinance. We now continue that conversation in progress.
We recognize, let me say, Mark, we recognize, the whole issue in safety. We've worked with the community in the past to look at, delivery windows to make it, safer and better for everybody. And we've been working, and those seem to be working. And now we are at this point where they really just want to go to barring them altogether. And as I said, they've gone to this whole thing of this sole source, which is at a rate that is a very healthy rate for what's being done, I would tell you. And it's like I said, it's hard to get information on this end of it about what's, how everything had gone down and everything like this. So I think where it comes down to, though, is this should be, one of those items where even if we didn't prevail here, we would anticipate appealing it. But we think the facts are very strong for us on this. And we are at the point right now where they asked for a mediator, the court, to look at it, and so we're waiting for a proposal back from the town as to kind of how they look to do it. I mean, ours is fairly simple. Our proposal is to remove the ordinance. We're willing to work with you if there's safety issues or air quality concerns or anything like that, Mark, and towards something that works for our transporters and their customers as well as the community. But what happened here was neither the transporters nor their customers were really involved in designing or implementing. I mean, we were involved in implementing. We were told to do it, really. And so, and like I said, it's one of those items where I think a lot of the folks will say, well, in the community, it's worked nicely for them and all this end of it. And so we don't have a problem if anybody wants to voluntarily choose to use sort of a service like that, but effectively mandating is something we can't allow to have happen.
What is the status of this case right now? Where is this at in the process, and what is the next thing? When do you anticipate the next action in this case?
Well, here's where it is right now. We filed in court last year, and we filed for an injunction, a full injunction in the ordinance. They granted a partial, which was, restricting, like allowing us still access and allowed to operate for what we call the higher volume, which is the UPS and the FedEx, but still keeping the other item in place. They appealed that, and we filed for an action to effectively remove the entire ordinance. And so right now where it is the court had honored, put forward the one injunction, and then asked for us to have a mediator was assigned and asked us, the judge asked us to try to work with him. And like I said, we're right now in the midst of waiting for a proposal from the community related to, their suggestion in light of the case and the actions. And if that is, something that would work for our folks, I would see we'd have to bring it up with our various companies and all that. then we would work toward, with the community toward it. If it's something where it keeps all of the items, their proposal still in place, and the restrictions and other things and items which, as we look at it, as we've noted to them, look, whatever the proposal is, it needs to be one that complies with the federal F4A, as well as any state laws on this in regards to deregulation. Once you go cross that line on this, we're fearful that you create a series of problems, not only within our state, but in other states as well.
I've been talking with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association about a new law in that state, previously Bill SB 100, that affects a number of trucking issues, as well as an ordinance in the town of Vail that essentially bans trucks from some parts of the town's commercial areas. The town of Vail is a very small community, having fewer than 5,000 residents, but the problem of such trucking bans is broader. Here to discuss those broader implications is OOIDA State Affairs expert, Doug Morris. Doug, how are you doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Very well. So, looking at this whole idea of banning trucks from a central business district in a town, how frequently are we seeing this kind of thing across the country?
So we're not really seeing it frequently. I know a few years back, I was at a freight advisory committee with one of our board members, Terry Button, and New York City, it was planning for the freight logistics for the future. And New York City had folks there from their administration, the mayor's office, and they actually proposed a situation where they wanted trucks not to come into the city of New York and have staging areas outside of New York City or warehouses where they would have, vehicles, alternate vehicles, or even they mentioned bikes come pick this stuff, products up and bring it into the city, instead of having trucks bring products into the city. And we just sat there and looked at them like they're from Mars. And basically what happened was, it kind of died, I think. I think they had some public hearings or had really looked into it and realized how much goods and stuff comes into New York City, and it's just, no way. It was just a nonsensical idea. And obviously this one in Vail it's absurd as well.
Well, to what extent is there a concern, even though Vail's a small community, but that actions like what they're doing there could inspire other communities to try something similar?
That's true. Obviously, they want to be trailblazers in this and be the first one to do it and see how great it is. But I guarantee it's going to be problems. How can you take frozen goods or things of that nature and put them on a small, electric cart that's not much bigger than a golf cart and bring it to a business without that stuff going bad or getting spoiled or something like that? They're going to have problems. I guarantee that, and it's not an ideal world that it's not going to be an ideal world, just a nonsensical idea.
It may be obvious to most people in trucking, obviously, but I think it bears saying. Can you explain from the trucking perspective why this is a problem to have these people doing this?
Well, you expected the truck driver to unload his goods or the goods that he's hauling into another vehicle and then deliver it to a business. It's just going to take more time. The cost of doing business there is going to go way up. The people who check off this stuff say, it's good. It's frozen goods and refrigerated goods and things of that nature. Once it's out of the trailer and onto another vehicle and then delivered via this other vehicle, whatever they have, they're going to. It does not make sense. It's just when you're talking about freight logistics, it's just way out there, and I don't get it. I'm wondering how it's going to work out. I'm wondering now how it's working out, and like I said, I just don't see it working out. I just don't.
Okay. Well, Doug, we're out of time here. I'm sure we could talk more about this, but in the meanwhile, thank you very much for the information.
Sure thing.
I've been talking with OOIDA's state legislative expert, Doug Morris. Folks, this is the part of the show every day where we urge you to call your members of Congress, but it's also important to be in contact with state and local officials about issues like this. You can do that using the website fightingfortruckers.com. That's our program for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
Get the most power and performance out of your rig with Howe's Diesel Defender. It provides maximum lubricity and contains specialized IDX4 detergent to clean and prevent deposits and safely removes harmful water. Visit HowesProducts.com for more information.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.